What I wanted to do is really talk a little bit about content that travels. How does content inspire? But I'm going to give you a real quick introduction to kind of who we are and what we do. Miles is a full-service marketing and advertising agency. And from an overview standpoint, just so you kind of understand who we work with, one of the things that's I think a little bit different is that we're high funnel. So we're engaged with our destination marketing organizations with saying, why do you want to go to California? And within California, why do you want to maybe go to San Francisco? So we're working up there to really drive traffic and create inspiration and engagement for folks who are figuring out where they want to go. I work in the hospitality division, so it's down a little lower now. It's you want to book this hotel and helping to convert. So we're going to talk a little bit about that high funnel, low funnel kind of process and go through a few other things. But just from by the numbers, we're 100% travel, about 220 folks with our company. There's some other statistics there. Ultimately, we love travel. We're encouraged as employees of the company to travel. And it's a big part of what we do, who we are, and our DNA. From the standpoint of the services, we're a full-service marketing and advertising agency, so across the spectrum. But we're really going to focus, I think, today on the digital aspect of content and how to get it to perform. Much of that is really influenced, I think, and informed by research. We don't conduct our own research. That would be a little self-serving from time to time, but we work very closely with destination analysts in sponsoring. And stop by if you can, or just do a download. The State of the American Traveler is a tremendous resource. It's published quarterly, and we go through technology, generations, what's motivating people, why are they traveling, what devices are they using, how are the different generations making different travel choices. So it's a really nice resource that's available to anybody, free to use. I'm going to talk about two little trends because it really, I think, informs a lot about what we do and what I think is the smart thing to do within travel. First of all, this is, and we've all talked about this, the hyper-informed traveler. And 5 years ago, we started talking about Susie goes to 138 different websites to figure out travel. And there's a couple of different kinds of content here. There's the mobile phone, and what we've asked in this is, what's the percent of American leisure travelers that have used these types of travel planning resources to inform their travel decisions? And we picked a couple here: mobile phones, user-generated content, which we've heard a lot about today, social media, and print. And surprisingly, print, as many people will tell you it is dead, is not in fact dead. It's on the rise. And the second thing I think that's interesting is, why do you think everybody is going to 138 travel sites to plan their trip and using and consuming all of this content? We don't have that answer. It's a very deep kind of process to get to that analytics, but I kind of have my own opinion. I'd be curious if anybody else, why do you think people are so consumed about researching their trip?
They're dreaming.
They're dreaming. Dreaming. Anything else?
They don't want to make a mistake.
I think that's the big one.
Fallacy of choice. People have too many options on where to get their information, and so they have to.
Oh, that's interesting. I didn't actually think of that. That's very interesting. That's another good point. They're all really good points. Here's two things that we do know. And I'll ask again. What do you think are the two biggest reasons why people don't travel as much as they'd like to? The two factors that limit how much they actually travel, even though they would want to travel more. What do you think those two things are? Time and money. Money's number one, time number two. And so I think that gets to your point, which is, boy, I don't have a lot of time. I really don't have a lot of money. If I'm going to travel, it's going to be good. I need to make it really, really good. I want to make sure I have a quality experience. And so a lot of that has to do with how you become part of that process. And the biggest thing I think sometimes getting in your way is Google. 40% of all search, and this isn't just travel related, we didn't get to that granularity, but Google is doing that search because we've been working with them very closely. 40% of all search ends up in no click to a website link. It's because of Google Answer. Google is answering questions. And when we think of Alexa, when we think of Google Home Assistant, when we think of the Internet of Things and machines interacting with internets as opposed to fingers and interacting with a type search on a device, you get a kind of an understanding that Google's getting in your way and effectively, because it's answering the questions, inhibiting the ability for you to expose them to your brand, your product, and engage and inspire them, which is ultimately what you want to do. So rise of the answer engine is a big problem. We're going to come back to that a little bit. And we're going to get into the topic, which is content that travels. So to start, we're going to be talking about creating and curating content that drives audiences. What does it look like? What's its purpose? Its purpose is to engage and drive direct bookings, but how do you do that effectively? How do you really make sure that you're going to be able to be effective in telling them about your brand, engaging them, drawing them in, and attracting audiences? Here's a good example. And this is Answer Engine. This is a snippet. So the question posed to Google is mahi mahi a dolphin? Okay? What comes up? This is Google Answer saying the answer lives at hawksk.com. Why would hawksk.com be the choice for Google to answer this question, is mahi mahi a dolphin? 18% of the guests at hawksk are sport fishers. It's a big segment for them. It's their audience. So we built 10 pages on the hawksk.com site that answer that question. And it allows them to engage with Hawksk in a meaningful way by getting information about mahi-mahi and selling charters, for which they get a slice of the revenue, as well as a contact form to say, I like sport fishing. Now we have information that we can market to them about all of the wonderful sport fishing opportunities that exist at Hawksk. So we're engaging with them in a very different way by creating content that has nothing to do with a resort in the Keys, a resort that used to be in the Keys, a resort which is now spread across the southeast United States to some extent because of the storms, which again becomes very important for making sure that there's content and storytelling for people that has nothing to do with the property. So there's a lot of different ways that we use content to effectively communicate, engage, and inspire. Here's another one which is interactive. And I think when we think about our property websites and the clients that we work with, interactions are the best way to engage. And here's a really good example. If you land and you're going into the Kahului airport and you want to drive to Hana, it's this windy, crazy road that is spectacular. There are some of the most beautiful sights in the state of Hawaii along this road. How do you engage people? How do you get them excited about doing that? So we built them just a very simple little map with all of the little mile marker posts that you can go through and see the must-sees on the road to Hana. Again, what we're trying to do is engage and create enthusiasm and excitement. Shoulder content also can be about talking about what you do different. And here's a different kind of an example. It's the Sherry Netherland. $850 ADR, 38 rooms, really, really top property in New York City. One of the problems they were having is how do we justify and substantiate our ADR of $850? It's a top property, but the big difference was the amenities that they provide. And they were never really bringing that to the forefront. It's interesting, a lot of hotels and resorts that have outstanding amenity services and other types of things bury that way down into about our property or way over here. For the Sherry, we put it front and center. It's right on the top nav. And there's pages dedicated to this particular item because this is what's resonating and engaging with the audiences. You need to think about that. We're going to talk about discovery in a little bit and how to get there. So that's our next topic, which is what are the types of content that their travelers are interested in, and exploring how content impacts search results and rankings. Because we talked about Google Answer, we talked about the complexity of Google curated content and the hyper-informed traveler. How do we connect? If you do not have, and I think almost everybody does, a content optimization and discovery system, there's several out there. We happen to use BrightEdge. There's Moz, there's BrightEdge. But content optimization and discovery systems allow you to do something very different from what most hotels and resorts and content producers and publishers actually do, which is gain insight into what are people searching for, what am I actually engaging with and getting results from search, and where am I not? And it allows you to go through a couple of different areas: searching, discovering what they're searching for, engaging, getting your content to target, to perform, and to delight. Social, how do you boost that interaction. Local, bridging the gap between the needs of the local visitor versus maybe your farther out markets with intelligent content that really answers questions. And you can perform very well with Google Answer and voice search when you're addressing the local aspect, as well as mobile. Mobile, a big part of mobile is micro moments. It's that quick little search that we do on a mobile device when we're at a commercial break, when we're doing something where we've got a couple of little minutes and we're just doing a quick little search. So content really does need to be developed for a variety of different audiences. We tend to publish content and say, here it is, dink, as opposed to a variety of different content types that resonate with audiences. So let's take a look. This is BrightEdge, and what we're looking at here is a destination marketing organization, Visit St. Pete Clearwater. This is pretty typical of what a destination marketing organization, which is really looking at that high funnel, is able to achieve. The graph is showing essentially what we've got here as far as, bloop, bloop, bloop. I don't know how to do that. Oh, the one that says like big lasered? Yeah, okay. So 588 universal results. What BrightEdge is doing is saying for visitstpeteclearwater.com, how many times does Google, for any kind of search, any keyword entered into Google, billions and billions and billions of different keyword searches that are occurring, how many times does that website produce a result for images, videos, carousel, places, quick answers, and 3-pack? How many times does that website come up, page 1, for any of those different types of search? And the answers are, 138 images come up in a Google search. Quick answers are the things that are going to perform well for voice search as well as for Google Quick Answers. And then we also have places and other types of content that, again, perform. These are the things that make you successful in Google curated content, because this is Google saying, I'm pushing this website forward as the answer to the question you're asking or the best resource for what you're looking for. You want to understand how that works. And again, this is a DMO, so they're very high in the funnel. Let's take a look at the Four Seasons Las Vegas. Four Seasons does a really good job. 3-4 years ago, Four Seasons built content. When you go to a property and on Four Seasons and you're looking for the Oahu property or the Las Vegas property, what comes up front and center? Picture of the destination. It's very rarely a picture of the property. It's very rarely a picture of the room. It shows the prettiest, shiniest, loveliest picture of Oahu or Las Vegas or wherever a Four Seasons hotel and resort might exist. They're winning the game and they're doing a really great job because they're essentially developing this kind of high funnel content to perform for them. Let's take another example, which is looking at simply the placement. So here we're looking at the modern Honolulu. And the modern Honolulu, for example, has 688 times for any kind of search. They come up on page 1. We can look at some comparisons, and I'll show you a little bit in a second about how a couple of properties on the island perform on that. But keep that number 2,641 kind of in your head, 2,500. And then the 688, 1032, 321. We're only looking at the total of page 1, 2, 3 results. Again, this can be a search for the modern Honolulu. Obviously, they're going to come up on page 1, right? Oh, sorry, it's right there. So modern Honolulu, this is non-branded search. So right here at the top graph, we're looking only at anything in search other than the word modern, because we're not looking for branded. But if we included that, they come up 921 times on page 1. The Moana Surfrider, 114 times page 1. The Royal Hawaiian, 538. The Halekulani, 398. The Four Seasons, 243. So the modern is really answering a lot of questions. It's really engaging on a tremendous number of levels. That's what we're talking about. It's content to really engage. How do you do it? How do you do it effectively? So here's an example of a search. Dole Pineapple Oahu. First one on the list, the Dole Pineapple Plantation. Second one on the list is the modern. So why does a contemporary luxury hotel in Honolulu come up as the second result for Dole pineapple? And the answer is because it's one of visitors to Honolulu's favorite things to do, is to go to the Dole pineapple plantation. You're enabling an opportunity for you to engage and draw in and find audiences that don't know you, that have never heard of the modern, and that have a lot of different kinds of needs. And you start to build a brand affinity by saying, we're a great option for you for visiting and for exploring the island. This is how good content looks. It's not 15 paragraphs of copy. It's not blocks. It's not like many hotels and resorts, a list of things to do on the island with links to Dole Pineapple Plantation. It's a page on Dole Pineapple Plantation. And it's got the kinds of things like what we love. And these are all the fun parts, the very best things. It establishes this kind of, we the modern are the insiders. We know the cool things to do. We know the great things to see. And you can start to get a feeling that when you're a guest there, the concierge, the staff, the team, they know where to go, what to do, how to experience it, how to enjoy it. It's part of that engagement and drawing in deep. Second thing, we do the brief histories. Again, these are nice, short little nuggets, good photography, all tagged, indexed, schemed, and everything else that you need to do to help it perform in SEO. It's a big reason why in those graphs that we looked at in the content analysis, it performs so well. It's because they're developing this kind of content. This lower part of the page, again, what do you need to know? How do you get there? What's the map? As well as just some kind of fun tips. Again, you're establishing that real knowledge, deep market knowledge that helps engage. As well as, and this is often a very frequently missed opportunity, okay, we know somebody's interested in doing stuff on the island. They've come to this page, right? What else might they want to do? Well, they might want to go on a helicopter tour, see a shrimp truck, and whatever. Again, you're just really creating this kind of engagement. When these pages launched, engagement, bounce, all of the statistics improved fundamentally. Time on site almost doubled, simply because it became a great resource. That's what you want to do with content. That's how you're going to be able to get it to perform, but it isn't just about writing paragraphs. It's about answering questions, being thoughtful, providing different formats. This kind of stuff up here, that's what Google Answer wants. That's what voice search wants. That's what machine-to-machine kind of search wants. Short little nuggets. They don't want paragraphs. Okay, they can take you to the paragraph, but that little nugget becomes something that is infinitely understandable by Google and becomes more promoted. So, third topic is really the latest trends in rich media and immersive technologies. Because we've talked about this a lot today. This gets a little dry, folks. It's mostly statistics, and I don't have shiny videos and other kinds of graphics, but it's interesting. Because we talked about it a lot today, and I think that there's a difference. If we're IHG, if we're Hilton, if we're American Airlines, these kinds of rapidly emerging, very sophisticated technologies can work. They can do very interesting things. But this is a very detailed study that was conducted. It was part of the State of the American Traveler that shows us how important is it? How often is it used? So there's some interesting aspects of this. One, first question we asked, this is about, and again, this is destination analysts conducting the research, 2,500 people surveyed, broad spectrum, all travel related. How much do you agree with the following statement? I research my leisure travel exclusively using my cell phone, right? Back here, down at the end, we've got strongly disagree on this side, and we've got strongly agree on this side. And you can see, there's quite a few folks here that it's not extremely important that they're using their mobile device, but still over 50%. It's a significant population. But you've got to program content, because truly, if you think about this, half your audience, roughly half, are coming and using that mobile device for that type of research and travel planning. And if it's just long paragraphs, again, if it's not optimized for mobile, again, it's a problem. Quick question, how many of you are hotels and resorts or hotel brands? Okay, next question, how many of you have a dedicated mobile budget? Roughly half. When you think of half of your traffic coming through mobile, and you think of half of the challenge of optimizing to mobile, and you think that half of the hotels that are here don't have a mobile budget, that's a disconnect. And that's something I think that needs to be part of your focus in producing content designed for different device types, because a lot of folks don't really do that. Second question was, new technologies hold the promise to make my travel experiences much more rewarding. It's a very small percentage disagree. Roughly 12% say not at all. The lion's share, though, on the other hand, agree, somewhat agree, or are neutral that the technologies hold the promise to make their travel more rewarding. So let's look at the statistics. Virtual reality headsets. 83.6% of people we asked had used a virtual reality device, okay? Have you used a virtual reality headset to plan travel? 10%. Again, do we want to take our valuable resources and budget programming to this kind of new technology, emerging technology, when 10% actually used it and it became? The interesting thing, though, is that that's up 7% from last year. So it's growing, and it's growing strong. Our advice is you need to think about it, you need to plan for it, and you need to be prepared for it, but unless you are a Hilton or an IHG or a major brand that's highly well-funded, it's probably not your best spend at this point in time. 2, interest in using virtual reality headsets to research destinations. So this is now, we're getting into the, if good content were available to you, how interested would you be in using virtual reality headset to research leisure destinations? Very interested. Very interested is 26, interested 26, neutral. Again, this is pretty small, but the increase is 14.6% over 21 months. Apologize, it's not a 24-month, but we do this quarterly, and it didn't quite match up to be year over two year. But again, you're seeing strong growth there. So we are definitely, as much as we've talked about VR and rich media and other types of content, it's still kind of in its infancy. Real-time video, same kind of a situation. So the awareness is definitely there. 54.3%, an increase of 38% versus the prior period, have heard of a real-time video. But again, we see that have you used it is still a small, fairly small number, 16.2, but also growing strong. So these are some of the different things, and there's kind of a final, the interest. Very interested in using real-time video. There's some other statistics here. I think this is our final one, which is what's gained a modest foothold is Amazon Echo and Google Home. 13.3% are using it. As far as messaging apps and chatbots, 16.3% are using those. And chatbots, I think we have a tendency, because this isn't segmented into independent versus brand, it isn't necessarily segmented into airline versus hospitality. A lot of times, I'm always talking to, I don't believe humans actually work at American anymore, at least not in my experience. But those are some of the things that I think when you think big brand versus independent, you kind of have to separate and factor that in a little bit. And finally, 360-degree video, again, 19.2% said yes. They have viewed a travel-related product in 360. So some things to think about, hopefully generate some questions. That's it, I'm out of time, but happy to take.
Anyway, okay, so you talk about content distribution. Of course, that is half of creating the content. I'm curious what channels you find work the best for that. You know, there's social, there's native, there's banner ads. You know, between those, what works best?
I think honestly, and Kontiki did a nice job today in saying, I think, something that was very salient to me personally. They used to have this content producer, that content producer, one for print, one for social, one for web, one for this, one for that. And they said, this is silly. You know, we're disjointing what we're doing in our content distribution and our content creation. So we've rolled it up together and we all work together. And I think that that's the way that you want to approach it. What works best for content, I think, is your owned channels. So that's going to be your website, your social, and your blogs, and the other things that you specifically own, including PR initiatives. you have the ability to effectively control message better in your own. But that doesn't mean that it should not inform and relate and, I think, be integrated with what you're doing in paid. We don't tend to think of our content optimization and distribution in terms of paid, in the sense that a lot of times the messaging becomes very controlled in the media that you're working within. But every time you produce a piece of content, you're writing a story, you're shooting a video, you're taking a photo. You want to be thinking of every single one of your own content distribution channels, as well as, to some extent, your opportunity to utilize those in your paid channels when you're conceiving of what you're creating with respect to that content. You want to be taking it and packaging it appropriately across the board. We have, I think, in the industry a tendency to say, here's our blog page, here's our new web page about our new spa. But we don't think about, okay, this is 3 paragraphs, a listicle, a little diagram, a couple of nice photos, and think about, okay, now what does that look like on our social channels? What does it look like on Instagram? What does it look like on our blog? What does it look like in our digital magazine? All of the different ways that you distribute across. But that needs to be part of your mindset every time you sit down to create is, how do I distribute this to everywhere? Because you should. Does that answer your question or follow up? Or? Okay.
And Scott, you had said that quick answers perform well for voice search. And then we have a question on the board, which is, so how is the emergence, we've been hearing a lot about voice search today, how does that impact the content strategy? Where is that going to evolve in the next few years? And what do you see people doing differently?
We say play Jeopardy.
Play Jeopardy.
Play Jeopardy. Jeopardy is questions. Voice is not. When we sit down to the computer and we type in a search, it's usually blah, 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 keyword, 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 keyword. When we go to Alexis, we say, Alexa, what's the best place to go to when I want to have a really romantic escape in Florida? And Alexa gives you an answer. You're thinking in Jeopardy in that your content needs to be phrased in the form of an answer, because more and more and more, what's coming at your search is going to be in the form of a question. And so a lot of times when we do our SEO, and we tend to say, best hotel in the Keys, and great hotel in the Keys near Marathon for this, and blah, 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 blah. Sometimes what we want to do is do that in a different kind of a structure, so we form it in the form of an answer. If you're looking for a great resort for blah, 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 this is your copy. Hawks Cay is one of the best opportunities for a romantic, well, I'm not a good copywriter, obviously, but you get the idea, right? So I think that that's part of when you're thinking about search in terms of voice, you want to kind of put your head in the sense of, what do I typically ask my cell phone or Alexa or my Google Home Assistant, and try to kind of reverse engineer your content so it's performing within that format. It's a big part of how you want to start thinking about content, because more and more and more, we're going to see that. Today, boy, this is off the top of my head, but by 2020, it wasn't Google, it was a different source. I've got that slide, I'll find it for you. Maybe I'll throw it in this presentation when it goes up from EyeforTravel. But by 2020, 50% of the interactions that are accessing the internet, devices that are accessing the internet for search, are going to be from machine to machine. Today, that's in the neighborhood of about 25%. So most of that activity is not occurring on machine to machine. And most of machine to machine is when you get in your car and you ask your car a question and it connects to the internet and gives you an answer and tells you where to go to get to a restaurant. Or what happens on Alexa and Google Home Assistant, or a voice search into your device. This is machine to machine type internet searching. Today, it's roughly a quarter, and in really 4 years, 2 years, 3 years, it's going to be 50%. It's massive growth. So that's the other thing that I think as an industry, when we start developing content and thinking about engaging, that we want to factor in.
Ready? Ooh. Hi, Ian from Travel Massive here. A question about influencers. So in tourism, there's a lot of people that are creating content, and this is sort of the rise of what are called influencers, which are people that are, have 100,000 Instagram followers and huge blogs and things like that.
Yep.
Do you have an opinion on that in terms of how brands can work with influencers? Do you think it's a thing?
I will caution you, this is anecdotal. I don't have the research to back up what I'm saying. The Pixley folks probably do. We've run across some other UGC providers and platforms that do. Here's what we see. Really fabulous model goes to a lovely resort, let's say the Condado Vanderbilt. And they're at the pool and they're taking shots and they're doing this stuff and they have 250,000 followers. And they put it out there. And let's say 50,000 people actually see that, all right? So that's huge, it's massive exposure. Very rarely do people like that actually create engagement. And the folks that I was talking to that, again, do the UGC stuff, said, our counterexample is Aunt Belma, okay? Aunt Belma's got 35 followers, but they're all family members. They love Belma. They are totally into Belma. Belma goes to the Condado Vanderbilt, and she gets a little anniversary welcome gift because they knew that it was her anniversary in the room when she comes in. And she has a lovely dinner. And they have one of the most romantic, she and her husband experience, events at the resort, and it's lovely. These people are now, all of Belma's 24 little followers instead of the 250,000 for the supermodel that was at the property the prior week. They're all going on, and let's all book, let's do a family reunion. And they tracked Belma, and Belma was a real case study that they did, generated something like in the neighborhood of 75 room nights for the property over the course of a year. And the trackability gets really tough when you're talking about somebody with 250,000 followers, but they really got deep and they really tried to understand that and they tried to really look and do it as best they could. They couldn't see any revenue creation for this big giant influencer. I think you need to be careful. I want to expose my brand to a ton of people, go for the big influencer. I want to generate revenue and I want to create the kind of engagement that's highly meaningful, go to Belma. It's different purposes and you need to think of different things that you're trying to accomplish and really delineate your goals as far as what you want to accomplish. And I think that that's going to help illuminate and inform your decisions as far as which way to go. But bottom line to your answer, they're both highly valuable. Just depends on how you use them.
Any other questions?
And
Good catch, Dwight.
if I ramble away and get lost on the question, feel free to do a redirect.
Well, Scott, you talked a little. You've been talking a lot about everything you've been mentioning is kind of top of the funnel, and then you touched briefly on VR. So, is VR in the funnel, outside the funnel? Is it pre-funnel?
I think it tends to be both. You know what? I'll be candid. I don't know. I don't have the research. I have opinions. I don't know the answer to that question.
It's still new and novelty, right?
Yeah, I don't think we have the segmentation of the data to say where it's really specific with a hotel or resort. It's early in its infancy in utilization and decision-making process. I think that the data becomes a little suspect when we're looking at really small numbers. You're going to have to poll 50,000 people instead of 2,500, which is significant as far as a sample size when you're doing the kind of questioning we're doing. When you want to get into that grain, I think you got to have a really big sample size, which is a very expensive study. Here's what I think, again, is that it's helpful throughout the process. I think particularly when some of the highly useful impact that we've had for VR is when somebody is making a decision of, do I want to pay extra for the Mac Daddy suite, or do I want to pay for a nice deluxe, or do I really just need a standard room? And if I'm going to pay this extra $250 a night for Big Daddy Suite, what do I get? And VR, I think, is very helpful in that kind of last-minute selling and conversion process if used effectively. Higher up in the funnel, it's about, boy, look at all the fun things I get to see and do in a much more immersive way than just photography or flat video. Again, I think it depends on the purpose.
Yeah. We've got to start wrapping up. Any other questions from the audience? Well, maybe to conclude then, as you've been here all day listening to these sessions, you heard Paul English of Lola, you heard Todd Henrik of Priceline. Anything that's jumped out at you in terms of some of these trends that we've been talking about? hotels are no longer, we're not travel companies, we're technology companies. You have to master payments. Anything that jumped out at you that you had an aha moment?
I think more than anything else, it's the complexity comes very much to the forefront.
Yep.
It's getting harder and harder and harder. There are more and more and more companies that are able, think 10 years ago, I had to go to this place to book, and I had to go to this place to research, and I had to go to this place to find the information. Today I can go to Marriott.com, and Marriott 5 years ago said, we want to become one of the world's premier content distributors on destination content. We want to be a publisher. We want to be huge in content, and destination content specifically. That's very different from 5 years ago, where we went from site to site to site to plan a trip. Now we can go one place. We can go to Google, and we can explore, and we can research, and we can book, and we can get our air, and we can do everything else. And we can do that at a tremendous number of sites. And then those sites are becoming really good storytellers because that's what people want.
Yep.
The technology is getting more and more complex. I think that the takeaway from everybody talking is about how complex it is, and that you just really need to stay ahead of it and stay informed and watch the trends.
And I'll be distributing Advil and vodka after this. So please join me giving a big round of applause
Thank you.
to
Really
Scott
appreciate your
Bacon and
time,
Miles
everybody.
Hospitality.
Thank you very much.